Cool. So, firstly, well, very warm welcome to everybody for our fourth virtual event. To introduce myself, I'm Ben from Total Media. We're a Google certified partner on both their publishing and advertising technologies. We help clients navigate and connect to the digital and programmatic media ecosystem. The aim of the event is to build a community of publishers and professionals interested in digital media and give them a place for insightful content and a forum for questions. So today, as the title suggests, we'll be discussing ad blocking. It's been a part of the digital ecosystem for a long, long time. It may even seem like a topic from another era. But as you'll see from kind of the discussions, ad blocking, how ad blocking rates and is ranked amongst publishers' concerns may surprise people. And we're excited to be joined by three guests from two different perspectives in the industry. Ad blocking really kind of needs no introduction. As I said, it's been around in the ecosystem for a long time. It comes in kind of two flavors. One is third-party browser plugins, which the user can download and then customize, or default browser settings, which they can also then play around with. And with that, I'd like to introduce our three guests. We're joined today by Lucinda Southern, who's a senior reporter at Digiday. And we're also joined by Job Plas and Ben Williams, who head up respectively industry relations and advocacy at eyeo. So the format's going to be a one-to-one interview with Lucinda, and then we'll bring on the gentleman from eyeo to kind of go through their thoughts. So if we'll try and cover your questions as they come, but if we don't manage to cover them at the end, please reach out to the team and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any questions. So I'd like to bring up Lucinda. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for joining. Lucinda is a senior reporter for Digiday in the UK, and she's UK Media. Oh, UK Media editor, fantastic. So sorry about that. So UK Media editor, and she's covered extensively ad blocking in the past. So firstly, thank you very much, Lucinda. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
So I guess let's start with, obviously having covered ad blocking in the past, what's your insight in kind of terms of ad blocking as it stands in the ecosystem today?
Well, when I speak with publishers in the UK and Europe, they usually say that it has been something that was maybe a top 3 priority back in 2015, 2016, to now it's like a top 10 priority. So it's still there, but there have been so many other problems and issues that publishers have to deal with that it's kind of shunted down the priority list. So, you know, it's stabilized. I've heard that most people, I'm hearing for global publishers, at desktop around 25%, 20% of blocked impressions. And then on mobile, it's, you know, sub 5%. And publishers to me seem pretty happy about that. They're keeping an eye on the numbers and have a sort of internal threshold that they are keeping an eye on, because, you know, things could change tomorrow and like mobile rate could go straight up. And the growth there seems to be driven by mobile, driven by markets in Asia as well. So really depends on the type of publisher and where you're focused and who your core audience is, how much of a problem it is for them at the moment.
Interesting. So do you think that drop in priority has been down to obviously the shift in mobile traffic and obviously the less adoption of ad blocking in mobile?
Yes, yeah, it's been more desktop, even though it's higher yield for ads. Traffic is mostly on mobile, but then also ads have improved, experience has improved. Things like the Coalition for Better Ads has meant that publishers have got much better at policing their own user experiences. GDPR has been a big help with that as well, in making sure people are, publishers are a bit more aware of the data that they're collecting with people. And you know, publishers have just got better at communicating, and they've done enough, like gone through enough painful years of testing and like trying to understand users. And yeah, they seem to have got into a way where they can communicate the value proposition, and people understand the value proposition and the importance of funding journalism as well. So, you know, you can't really underestimate that goodwill there for people wanting to continue funding for it.
And do you feel that kind of the ad blocking has been a driver for those positive changes, or you think it's been other things?
It'd be hard to say. There's just been a number of different factors that have led to it. So really isolating it and pinning it on one thing, particularly ad blocking, could be difficult. I think most publishers would say that it would be a combination of things. I guess there has been, it's evolved, hasn't it? The types of people who are ad blocking has changed. The ways of blocking ads have changed. How we're measuring it is changing as well. So, I think the acceptance is that when it peaked, when it became quite mainstream, and then the rates went down, where the original cohorts of people who were always going to be blocking, always going to be against tracking, people who are gamers or engineers or who are really tech savvy, the ones who have always been blocking, it's going to be hard to get those people to actually ever stop. And that sort of acceptance feels to be quite, to me, that's where the publishers are at.
Mm-hmm. And from the publishers that you speak to, they've had success in kind of converting those profiles that are more susceptible to using ad blockers. They've converted those to subscriptions or other sort of revenue streams. Yeah,
well, I mean, diversifying revenue streams is a key, important part of how severe a publisher would find the threat of ad blocking. Back a couple of years ago, it was what prompted Future Publishing to explore e-commerce and other revenue streams. There's other publishers that, the media, like selling media on a click is not really I don't want to be speaking for all publishers here, but there's a lot more than just selling the click of as media. So there's lots of content partnerships or video ads as well, and other diversified revenue streams. But I mean, it seems like, the main way to respect people's choices, the main way is just to communicate with people, offer them as many different choices as possible. Again, going back to Future, they had success in bringing down the rate of ad blocking by just offering as many different options as they could on in their ad block messages, whether it was to whitelist the site or turn off the ad blocker, or to view a video ad, or to become a member, or other different types of actions that they wanted to do. And that seems to be one of the best solutions.
Sure, and I think, Future's a good example. They have already anyway a very engaged user base and readership that are able to play off and have those multiple different conversations and to play around with several different options. Do you have any kind of advice or tips that you would give to those slightly smaller mid-range publishers or smaller publishers that might be suffering from ad blocking, that don't necessarily have the high engagement in terms of repeat users and people that understand their brand of publishing, but would also want to be trialing similar things?
Sounds like just a lot of testing, and that is that's easy but hard, isn't it? What you have to do, but it's just doing that grind all the time is not an easy thing to do. So I can see that people want to keep, or publishers want to keep their content open. They don't want to throttle their reach by putting up subscriptions or blockers or paywalls. So just continuing to test the different ad units on their sites, maybe doing more native ads, more video ads, really looking at the viewability scores for their different ad units, removing the ones that aren't going to be as favorable, even though that publishers are nervous of removing inventory, but really drilling down into the numbers to make sure that it's going to end up being a net positive.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen from your recent talks with publishers any sort of change in terms of ad blocking numbers due to the pandemic?
I've not actually. I've not asked if that's made a difference. I wonder if there's less mobile traffic, if people are commuting less, but it's not come up in any conversations that I've had. The only thing that has come up is, which is before the pandemic really, was around different publishers offering subscription publishers offering a different or a lower tiered version of anti-ad and anti-tracking access for a smaller monthly fee.
Mm-hmm.
And as the different browsers that are going to be cracking down on cross-site tracking, and as those ecosystems close up, and that seems to be those, multiple walled gardens within it. I mean, perhaps it's not really in the spirit of the open web, but it's going to be quite a few publishers that are going to go down that route.
Yeah, I think so, especially when you factor in the stuff that publishers are trying to build up their own kind of value with first-party data, and those smaller ones will need to kind of partner with other outlets to be able to kind of build up their data and what they have on users to be able to trade off that programmatically and direct.
Yeah, no, I agree. For the smaller ones, that will be more of a case of partnering with the right people, collectives and coalitions and alliances. I'm sure there's going to be many more of those coming up.
For sure, and the question is really in terms of when you get to the kind of consent and all of these different options that you're presenting to the user, it becomes quite a complex thing for a publisher to navigate all of those different messages that potentially on that first wave of entering a site that the user's going to be offered to, with the ad blocking, with consent for data, and then potentially with subscriptions and that kind of stuff. It's a very noisy environment that the user might be offered. Yeah,
definitely. And you've heard a lot of publishers that were tying in their ad blocking messages with their consent management platform messages for GDPR, bring it as another way. Even though you want so much choice, I guess you don't want the extent of choice that GDPR can give within those opt-in messages. But yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act.
For sure. And do you know any publishers that you've recently seen that kind of have got that balancing act right?
Well, I use an AdBlock Plus, so for research purposes. Yeah, I mean, there's loads that are doing. I do think Future does a great job. Dennis does a great job. Spiegel as well. Axel Springer. Germany's had it particularly tough, where a higher percentage of their internet users blocking ads. So they seem to be the first ones who were on this, which I'm sure we're going to hear more from guys at AdBlock Plus about that.
For sure. And then really, I guess, in terms of, do you think that any recommendations for publishers in terms of what you think drives value with users and helping engagement?
Well, as well as testing lots, offering different choice, different versions, and then depending, showing a bit of personality has gone down well in the past as well. Publishers being able to use a bit of humor, using something that's really clearly part of their tone of voice. Those things have gone down well in the past, but there's still potential for more testing around that for sure.
So I think it's really relevant making that, whatever that message is on the same sort of similar theme as the general content, and keeping it as authentic as possible to the user base.
And being able to explain that value proposition in a succinct way, one that appeals to consumers. And yeah, I mean, publishers are just always getting better at trying to understand the audience after having a period where they were just so disconnected from them. And it's not a surprise that people were blocking ads. There were some really horrendous experiences. So it's the natural progression and evolution of a ad ecosystem and digital ad industry that's coming through and growing up.
And what do you think kind of was the reason for that disconnect? Because I think I definitely agree with you that there was a disconnect in terms of how publishers were treating their users. But do you have any kind of insight in terms of what caused that disconnect in the past?
Well, people say the common argument would be programmatic advertising and having devastated print revenues and circulation, everything moving to online, and not really understand, the infinity of the internet, being able to put advertising everywhere, and having to drive revenue as much as possible when it was sinking elsewhere. So it was just a wild west. There weren't really any rules or regulations at that time. And yeah, there was a lot of eggs that were broken along the way. But publishers are paying for those missteps.
Yeah, I think so. I think that coupled with obviously people were just trying to find their feet with the new tech landscape and programmatic, and then had a bidding coming in, that this whole kind of lather, rinse and repeat of testing and seeing what works from a revenue perspective and from a user experience perspective, and that kind of stuff always kind of created that vacuum of opportunity where they kind of lost their way in terms of, okay, what's their core in terms of their content and how they engage with their readership.
Yeah.
And then, like, if we could kind of tie things up, and if you've just got can give us any sort of insight in terms of where you think the future's going with regards to ad blocking and data and that kind of stuff.
It's hard to say because, you know, publishers do feel braced for something changing very quickly, or for mobile to explode, the ones that I speak to anyway. But again, are keen not to get into that arms race of, you know, keen to respect that people might want to still block ads. Again, we're going to have more walled gardens within the open web, like created by publishers who are keeping their own first-party data in check, and who are finding it increasingly hard to track users outside of their own properties. I think with things like that, offering the different variations of trackingless or ad light at a lower price point will be able to, you know, satisfy the appetites of those like AdBlock curious cohorts that are at the moment. I mean, it's been decreasing holding steady or decreasing for a while now, long enough for people to feel a little bit more at ease. So, you know, the problem is still there, but the hysteria has quietened as more things have become important.
Fair enough. No, that totally makes sense, Bill. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your great insight and good conversation. And let's bring up the guys from eyeo now. So hi guys, so just to bring everybody back, we can now formally introduce Job and Ben from eyeo. So Job heads up industry relations at eyeo, and Ben heads up, is the director of advocacy there. And so just to kind of put some context, but I'll let them formally kind of introduce the company. They work for eyeo, who are probably best known as the creators of AdBlock Plus, but are much deeper than that. So welcome guys, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for being here.
So, so why don't you just kind of introduce to the audience what eyeo actually do and are involved in?
Yeah, so, I mean, eyeo has been around since around 2011, and you're right, it really started with AdBlock Plus, and both Job and I have actually been there. We're at about 230 people now, and Job and I were, you know, within the first 10 who joined, and we came on 2012, 2013, and really saw ad blocking just take off at that time. It became, you know, Doc Searles, the, you know, famous privacy researcher at Harvard, called it the greatest boycott in human history. And I'll tell you, those were some days. It was exciting back in those days, because you were really, as an ad blocker, you're really disrupting things. I think the thing that we've seen over the last couple of years, and the thing that eyeo started that's now become more of an independent, open thing, is acceptable ads, which is another option that publishers have to reclaim some of that lost revenue. And just basically short, you know, introduction to that. I'm sure most of the people on the call probably know what it is by now. But acceptable ads is just that if ads basically work against criteria that are established by an independent committee, then those ads can apply to get, you know, sort of let through. And it's not just AdBlock Plus and ad blockers associated with eyeo, but most ad blockers these days. And that really began the process of ad blocking becoming ad filtering. And when Lucinda brought up the Coalition for Better Ads and then the great work that they do, when you factor in what they're doing, what you're seeing now is, hundreds of millions of users out there, whether they're just a normal Chrome user getting the Better Ads experience through the Coalition for Better Ads, or whether they're using a number of different ad blockers and getting acceptable ads. It's sort of given publishers more options about what they can do, and also given users the ability to see some ads or block them all. And the good news for publishers is most people liked acceptable ads, and very few people opt out of it.
No, that's good to hear. I mean, so obviously acceptable ads is a standard that publishers can adhere to, and that users basically get by default when using AdBlock products or ad filtering products and that kind of stuff. But is there any sort of talk within the standards to make it like a branding thing and a go-to-market thing for publishers, that they can have a certification and put it on their site as like a stamp of approval, like Tag does?
Yeah, so that's absolutely one of the topics that is being discussed in the Acceptable Ads committee. It's going to work a little bit more on the transparency around like acceptable ads and the thing that the Acceptable Ads standard is trying to accomplish. And I think that's a very interesting topic for them to actually look into, because one of the things that I personally like a lot about the Acceptable Ads committee is that it's mostly a user-driven initiative. So in contrast to like other industry initiatives that we've seen, Coalition for Better Ads, or stuff that the IAB does over the last years, it never has like actual user representation on it. And this is one of the things that the Acceptable Ads committee sets apart. So there's equal representation between the online advertiser supply chain and with the user focus there. So yeah, that's absolutely one of the things that they're looking into.
So that's really interesting. So in terms of the user voice, how many users are actually part of that coalition?
So on the user side of the committee, it's basically there's 4 seats in that group. 3 are taken by digital rights organizations. So you will find Consumer Action from the US in there. But there's also like 1 seat being taken by an actual ad blocking user that has been using ad blockers for a long time and actually working on maintaining his own ad blocker too. So that is really the idea, that person is then also doing the outreach to more ad blocking users to bring that perspective to the table, because it should not only be the industry to decide what is good enough for users and what is not. There should be actually a user there to provide that perspective on it.
That's good. And could you, obviously you talked about acceptable ads and the Coalition for Better Ads. Are you able to kind of just highlight to the publishers on the call what the differences are in that? Because it's very nuanced and they may not necessarily understand the impact of how each kind of one behaves.
Yeah, so a good question. So there's of course a lot of overlap. I think both organizations try to work on standards that are making online advertising better for the users. So that's definitely the thing that they share in common. But I think the big difference is that we kind of like to see the open web in an 80-20 split, if you will. 80% of the web, I always use my parents as kind of like the example there. They are not that bothered by blinking ads and video ads, etc. So the traditional advertisement formats set by the Coalition for Better Ads, they work for them. That's good enough for them. What we are talking, what the Acceptable Ads Committee is talking, is really that 20%, the 20% roughly of the open web that is browsing the web with an ad blocker. And those users, they just don't respond, to traditional ad forms. That is also why they have installed like an ad blocker. So the Acceptable Ads Committee is really deciding on the standard for that 20% of the kind of like the typical tech savvy, the geeky, the higher educated user base that is installing ad blockers.
Mm-hmm. Which is also kind of the kind of user base that advertisers are really looking to tap into anyway, because they tend to have a higher net worth and a higher disposable income, and also spend a lot more online and that kind of stuff. So it is an important audience. How do you see that audience kind of developing and adapting with kind of millennials and younger age users?
Yeah, so I think it's still very much holds true for a lot of the user base of like that is installing ad blockers, that they do tend to skew very much to like the younger segment, the millennial segment, Gen Z segment, especially on desktop. Of course, one of the things that is a difference is that generation is maybe less of an avid user of the web. They tend to be spending more time within the walled gardens of iOS, Android, and within apps. So of course there is like less of a technical opportunity to also provide ad blocking services there.
So if we circle back to kind of the ad blocking product, are you able to give the audience a little bit of update in terms of numbers and percentage ads blocked or percentage of installs and users and that kind of stuff?
Sure. I mean, at AdBlock Plus, basically we have around 100 million users. We've been sticking steady around that, even as, desktop numbers has been correctly reported in a lot of places have kind of leveled off. But the more important number, I think, to keep in mind is the amount of users who are taking on or using acceptable ads. And that's somewhere around 200 million users right now. So what's come out of that is this ecosystem, and in a lot of ways it mirrors the sort of, as Job was saying, the 80%. This mirrors this ecosystem mirrors that ecosystem very much, because you have advertisers, of course, on there. You have publishers, and then you have a growing list of ad tech providers who help the advertisers get the ads to the publishers. But it's just within the bounds of this ecosystem, and also within the sort of strictures defined by the Acceptable Ads Committee, that standards making body.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. Are you able to kind of talk to us in terms of how those standards are developing and evolving?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can take that over. So I think since the Acceptable Ads Committee took over in 2017, what they started focusing on first is crafting criteria and a standard for mobile ads. So this was really the first kind of like big milestone that they've reached, I think, back in 2018. Right now, they commissioned research into looking into video ads and to kind of see whether there are video ads that are good enough for ad blocking users, and if so, how they should look like. As it looks like right now, this is going to be finished in Q3. So probably in Q4, you will hear what the decision is from the committee, whether video ads are going to be considered acceptable or not.
Mm-hmm. And that's just to frame that's video ads across all the spectrum, both inbound of video and also in-stream?
Yeah, so they focus mostly on pre-rolls as kind of like the lowest common denominator initially, and to kind of present those video ad formats to ad blocking users to gauge what their perspective and their perception is on that. So that's how they do. They first wanted to start with the pre-rolls.
No, that makes sense totally. So are you able to kind of go into some sort of your guidelines for publishers in terms of how they should treat ad blocking users and engage with them and potentially offer them different services, and what you feel has worked with publishers that might be on the Acceptable Ads board and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, it's different for every publisher, and I think Lucinda laid out a lot of the things that publishers are doing, and just go, for instance, to the Washington Post and go to the Guardian, and you see that if you have an ad blocker installed, and you see that they deal with that in a very different way. And so they know their audience best, and they know what's going to work for that audience the best, and they test that obsessively. And for some of them, it's a very nice nudge to perhaps support their site. And as we know, basically since 2016, there was this election in a place I'm from but don't live anymore, and people started to pay a lot more attention to the news and try to get actual real news about what was going on in the world. So you see other factors, of course, that are driving subscriptions, I think. But then when you come back to squarely the ad blocking issue, The publisher knows best, but what we found is that, there are 56% or so of the ComScore top 100 publishers have used acceptable ads. So that has seemed to be a robust solution for a lot of publishers out there. Others, have gone in different ways. Sometimes you can work with vendors out there that offer you either a subscription model or watching a video, or going on with an ad light experience with acceptable ads. So I think testing and knowing your audience, those are the two most important things.
Mm-hmm. No, that definitely makes sense. And I think it's something that all publishers kind of try and deal with, is getting that, as Lucinda said, getting that balance right, especially in today's world where we've got also conversations going on in terms of data and privacy and lots of other different things that a publisher is trying to engage a user on, as well as their content. So it definitely is a challenge. You able to kind of, how many publishers do you have on the coalition? Oh, sorry, on the Council for Acceptable Ads.
Acceptable Ads Committee, but there's so many industry initiatives. There's so many industry initiatives out there. It's just fine. So from the top of my head, there's 5 publishers on there, and it's spearheaded by Nick Flood from Future, that is basically leading that group of publishers, and to really bring that agenda to the table. And he's been absolutely fantastic to really represent publishers within that constellation, to help educate everybody around the table, what their problems are, what their pain points are, and to really find the compromise with everybody around the table, so including the ad blocking users, digital rights organizations, etc.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we've got obviously a number of different questions in terms of the AdBlock Plus products and ad blocking in general. So a user will download it, install it, and usually utilize it because of bad user experience on a particular website, and not necessarily play with the settings in terms of whitelisting sites and that kind of stuff. And then obviously other publishers are impacted by that. That will get obviously the acceptable ads. But is there anything in terms of giving publishers back control in terms of being able to have a much more nuanced approach, what premium publishers that not necessarily that site that was impacting, in order to gain back that relationship with the user, other than them having to identify somebody using an ad blocker and reach them with a message?
Yeah, I mean, you can always go with that approach of messaging your users and sort of making them aware of sort of the value exchange that's inherently there. What we found in just speaking to a lot of our users is that most users are very much aware of it. It's like, yeah, no, I'm giving my attention to these ads in order to get the content for free. But I think that's been the big change from, say, 2013 until now, is that publishers have a wide variety of things that they can use in order to get those readers to either look at all the ads that they have, or maybe to take an ad light experience through acceptable ads, or to take another sort of ad light experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely changed a lot. I mean, in that time, there were a lot of other solutions that didn't prove to be that successful, and maybe it's more interesting to focus on those sometimes. But there was an attempt for a while to just circumvent the ad blockers through technical means. So, like, essentially, they're blocking these ads, so you fill in those ads with other ones, and that was a back and forth, not with us, but with the open source community that sort of makes ad blocking work. And, most, I'll say, far thinking publishers, or the publishers who were looking at it a little bit more long in the tooth, they said, we got into this problem in the first place by, overpopulating our site with ads, and it just doesn't work to force the ads on the people. And so I think the lesson that people learned in all of that, and it's the exact same lesson that that has been taught through GDPR and browsers, basically getting rid eventually by 2022 of third-party cookies, is that you have to listen to the user's wishes. If you listen to their wishes, they're willing to engage in that value exchange, but they want to do it on their own terms. And I think that's the lesson that sort of we basically have, I think, learned at this point with ad blocking, and therefore you have all those options. And it's just my hope, and I actually think that it will be this way, that with the death of the third-party cookie, not to change subject, we're going to see a parallel situation. And I think that from all the efforts I've seen from the industry, that's exactly the lesson that they're taking to heart.
That's good that they're actually learning from those kind of lessons. Are you doing any work with consent management platforms to kind of unify that messaging piece and to help them in terms of, okay, we have to, as a publisher or as an industry, consent for users for different things, and to roll in that kind of the ad blocking piece into like consent management notifications, so that the user's not bombarded on that first hit onto the website with a cookie toast and a privacy toast and an ad blocking toast if they're using ad blocking as well. Because I think everybody's been on those websites where the first time you go onto a specific page or a specific user on that session, you're bombarded with all these different kind of messages that kind of stop you getting to the content.
Yeah, I mean, we have, of course, informal talks with people, and we have spoken to publishers just basically when they ask, well, how was it with ad blocking? But I feel like most of the publishers know how it was out there. And I mean, again, Yobi may have a different view on this one, but for me, we haven't quite reached the perfect equilibrium with the cookie notifications quite yet.
Yeah.
But I do think we'll get there. It's just right now is that sort of experimental phase. But yeah.
I mean, that kind of goes in, because I think it ties into very nicely in terms of the settings that you have in terms of non-personalized ads and non-targeted ads. Do you see a lot of people opting into that?
With that feature, it's not too popular. Users are they are looking at settings, and some of them are disabling the acceptable ads list, for example. That used to hover around like 8% of the user base of AdBlock Plus at least, and we've seen this actually decline a little bit over time. So it's even less than before. But there's other features that users do opt into. So for example, this additional privacy protection that we offer within the product. So another blocking list that is absolutely a list that is pretty popular and is being used by roughly 10 to 20% of our user base.
No, that makes sense. And are you able to? Do you have any data that you're able to share in terms of how acceptable ads impacts kind of RPMs on pages for those that are using it?
Do you mean like, just basically like the RPMs that acceptable ads gets, you mean?
Yeah, so exactly. So basically, obviously a user that is using a AdBlock Plus product will go into a website and it restricts creatives and impressions on that particular page. So obviously it has an impact on that publisher's revenue for that particular page and that particular user. Do you have any kind of data that you're able to share in terms of what the percentage difference is between that and a user that isn't necessarily using an acceptable ads product?
Unfortunately, no real data. Publishers, as you know, are generally not too forthcoming about stuff like that. But what we have seen with acceptable ads is over the years, one of the parts of the chain that really wasn't paying as much attention to ad blocking as the supply side was just the demand. When you go to the DSP and back to the agency, all the way back to the advertiser, this wasn't always a first level concern on their side. But then, what we've been able to do partly is sort of evangelize that idea of how, you know, Ben, you brought it up before, how valuable this audience is. You know, they're young, they're tech savvy. They actually spend, in the studies we've done, they literally spend more money online than your non-AdBlock user. And other ones backed up like by Global Web Index. And so it's just been sort of getting them to know that, hey, this is a valuable audience, and you really need to talk to your agencies and your DSPs about buying on this within this ecosystem. And that is an ongoing process. So we have seen that those RPMs have increased over the years as you get more premium advertisers, just to know that they can reach that audience out there again.
Mm-hmm. And from your conversation with those advertisers, you actually see that targeting them to acceptable ads, and they're actually performing for those campaigns that are running to that user base?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know, it comes down to like simple arithmetic. I mean, you have ads that are worth more money and they come through, and you have a user base that's highly valued, and they're going to fetch higher CPMs. So, I mean, it's definitely a change that we've seen happening. But as all things in ad tech, you know, it does take some time. And so that is an evolving process. And we definitely look forward as one of the players in that system of having more advertisers sort of take advantage of that huge opportunity.
No, that makes sense. And you're able to kind of just give some insight in terms of the trends that you're seeing and where you see kind of things going in the next kind of 12, 24 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what obviously we've already seen this trend from ad blocking to ad filtering. That's happened over the last several years. And so, I'm going to sort of repeat myself here, but I think that the main trend that we've been seeing start is that you just find more value of advertisers who are realizing the tremendous reach that's available to them. You know, considering the entire open web, 200 million is not everything, but it's a very big number, and it's an audience that's certainly worth looking into. So I think we'll see a lot more of that, and then just the switch to mobile. That is, as we've seen desktop level off, and as Job was pointing out, you see younger users are more tied to their phones than their desktops. And there was a report back in February about ad blocking numbers, and it confirmed basically that desktop is leveling out, but we've seen then more mobile browsers sort of take on ad blocking and acceptable ads in particular as a default feature. And, this just makes their product more interesting. And so we've seen it definitely switch over to mobile. I expect that to continue.
That makes sense. And in terms of that, it's a very interesting thing. Obviously, there is value in the user base and the audience that are using acceptable ads. Do you see that as something that the tech players that are a part of it want to add in as a value to their users in terms of giving buyers on DSP seats the ability to target those users?
Yeah, that's absolutely something that we've seen. We've seen just a lot more interest coming from actually some of the brands that have like a natural overlap between like the ad blocking user base and their own customer base, and they just actually go out and ask for the demand partners to actually set up the ad campaigns specifically targeted at those ad blocking users. And that's something we're hopefully going to see more.
No, that's interesting. So, we've got a question from one of our listeners in terms of how do you actually study the purchasing habits of the AdBlock users? Is it data that you buy in, or is it stuff that you do your own research on?
Definitely stuff that we've done our own research on. One thing about AdBlock Plus from its open source days before it came on with eyeo is that we weren't allowed to have any information about our users. So we have a very strict privacy policy. I'll tell you, it's tough hiring marketers if you do that. So, come in, we'll know nothing about our users. It's wonderful, really. But no, in all seriousness, no, we don't do that, and it's a point of principle for us. And it's really hard to that's one of the things. I think it was an article in Digiday, actually, Lucinda, of like, you know, it was lies, statistics, and ad blocking numbers. You know, it's really hard to get any sort of real data on ad blocking users because of the privacy sort of baked into it. What I can say is that we have done extensive research with you know, our users voluntarily, and we also have looked to places like Global Web Index, who have statistics that they add to every quarter. And what they do is they basically just they separate ad blocking users into those who are purely ad blocking users and ad filtering users. And then they do ask them about their buying habits. And that's where we are able to sort of glean insights into buying habits, and you know, and demographics and things like that.
Yeah, and to add to that, that is similar to how the Accept Last committee is doing it. That's always the one question they always, like, you know, pose to the vendors is, do you have enough people like in your database that you can actually filter out the ad blocking users? So it's really going back to that 80-20 split again. So we always like tend to focus on that 20% because that is really the segment that we're responsible for.
No, it really makes sense, and I think it's a good thing. Okay. So yeah, we had one more question from the guys at Admiral. Really, is they really want to know who would win in an arm wrestle between Ben and Joe.
Oh, definitely Yo. Come on.
I agree.
No, I mean, you know, you can't see this, but the guy's like 6'4". I'm 5'9" in you know, high heels. So, you know, definitely Yo.
Really, I didn't know you had your heels on for the call, but that's good to know.
I've got a foot cam. I don't think Zoom supports that, unfortunately. I wanted to show them off, but
fair enough. Maybe next time we'll save that for something for the follow up in 2021. But thank you very much for the conversation. I think we've got more questions.
No questions. YouTube video coming up. Follow up.
So yeah, essentially we'll post the video on YouTube and our social channels, and we'll also transcribe it and post it on our blog as well, so people can have access to it afterwards. So if anybody missed parts of it, they can come back for it. But thank you very much for our guests, Lucinda, Job, and Ben. It's been a great conversation. I think everybody's found it very insightful and entertaining as well. And if anybody has kind of guests or ideas for guests or content, please feel free to reach out to the team, and we'd love to hear what you want to hear in upcoming sessions. But thank you very much, everybody, for their time, and enjoy the weekend.
Cool. Thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.